Greetings, everybody. Nina the Mystic here, and welcome to another Cindy Live. This week, we do have a returning guest, Christopher John Bjerknes. How you doing today, Christopher?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Nina? Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. I love your videos. You got so many videos. There's so much information. It's mind-blowing, honestly, and it's hard to pick even which subject to go with. But this week I thought I would touch on a video that you do. So if you guys are new and you don't know, he does have a video or YouTube channel. You can go and check out all his stuff there. He's already done a video on this, so you can always go back and watch that again. But I watched this, and it was about Satan being Seth, and I thought that was really interesting. And then we were chatting there, and I brought some information that you didn't know, and that's what I'm going to start this off with, and then you're going to take over and continue with the thing. But a lot of you who are here are probably in the occult. You probably know a lot of the occult information. This might be old news to you, but for some of you this might be new. And so on the subject of, is Satan Seth, I just want to bring this up to everyone who doesn't know. So there actually is a thing called Temple of Seth, which was founded by Michael Aquino. And I'm just going to read it here so that for those of you, I do have this down in the description, okay, if you want to read the Wikipedia thing here for yourself. The Temple of Seth is a cult initiatory order founded in 1975, a new religious movement and a form of Western esotericism. The temple espouses a religion known as Sethism, whose practitioners are called Sethians. This is sometimes identified as a form of Satanism, although the term is not often embraced by Sethians and is consented by some of the academics. The temple was established in the United States in 1975 by Michael Aquino, an American political scientist, a military officer, and a high-ranking member of Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. Dissatisfied with the direction in which LaVey was taking the church, Aquino resigned and, according to his own claim, embarked on a ritual to invoke Satan, who revealed to him a sacred text called the Book of Coming Forth. Now, this might be an interesting read. I don't think I've read that myself. According to Aquino, in his work, Satan revealed his true name to be that of Seth, which has been the name used by his followers in ancient Egypt. Aquino was joined in establishing the temple by a number of other various Sethian groups were established across. But I thought that was very interesting. It was something that Christopher didn't know at the time that he was doing this work. And it kind of validates the stuff that you have brought to the table here, that Michael channeled essentially Satan, and Satan told him that he preferred to be called by the name Seth. I thought that was very, very interesting. So now I'm going to let you take over because you have a whole lot more on this than I do.
From what I was able to glean, Michael Aquino was a military intelligence officer who was involved in Vietnam. And
thanks for the sub.
At the same time was involved with Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. And the Wikipedia page accurately portrayed where it went from there. I found something interesting. He not only said that Satan was Seth, and in his mind, Satan is God, he likened the monolith in 2001, which is something that I've been covering very heavily recently, the black cube in 2001 in his book, Temple of Set. He said that portrayed the presence of Seth, who to him is Satan. Now, to the ancient Egyptians, Seth was always viewed as the god of chaos, darkness, storms, clouds, the wilderness, and very significantly, the god of foreigners. And to the Egyptians, the red sands of the desert represented the foreigners, because the black dirt was the dirt deposited by the Nile that was very fertile. So they spoke in terms of the black lands, which were fertile and had the order of Ma'at. And they also spoke of the red deserts of the foreigners that were chaotic Isfet. So they had a dualistic system. And Seth was represented as the god of darkness and chaos, which is, of course, Satan. And the god of order and light was Ra, the god of the sun. And in the Bible, there is a code that the God of Israel is actually Seth, and he wages war on the God of Ra, and he wants to turn the world into darkness. And that's portrayed by his presence in the Holy of Holies in the temple, where he appears as a cloud of blackness, and he says that he lives in darkness. It appears in the story of the 10 plagues of Egypt, where he wages war on Ra and kills off the Egyptian firstborn in the middle of the night when they are furthest from the sun, from Ra. And he puts them into palpable darkness. But while the Egyptians are lost in that darkness and panicked, the Israelites see brighter than ever, and they refer to that as shining darkness. Same thing occurred when Moses parted the Red Sea. A cloud appeared. It cast darkness upon the Egyptians, but it brought light to the Israelites. And in this way, they were able to smite their enemies, and they worshiped Seth. And Seth adopted them because Seth was the original god, the chief god of the pantheon of the Egyptian gods. And the Egyptians slowly abandoned Seth in favor of Horus, who fought with him. And when he poked Horus in the eye, a black pig appeared to Horus, and we can get into that later. And that represented Seth. You can see that in some of the icons in Pink Floyd concerts. I don't know whether they are aware of it or not, but it relates very closely to the way Plutarch described the Egyptian mythology of Seth and his battle with Horus. So the Egyptians had initially worshipped Seth, the god of darkness and chaos. They worshipped him because he was the primordial god. Nothing could exist without the substratum of chaos being first present. So they viewed Seth as being the most powerful. They viewed chaos as being tremendously energetic, the source of
Now,
fire.
I just want to ask, do you want me to show this stuff on the screen right now, or?
You can. That goes back to Michael Aquino and what
Okay,
he
you let
wrote.
me know when you want me to share it. I wasn't sure. And I just want to mention too that in the Bible, it does say in the beginning there was darkness.
Absolutely. It follows
So,
the classic
yeah.
cosmology of most of the ancients. The Greeks had a god of chaos. They had the primordial waters of chaos. And the Egyptians had the same idea. The Mesopotamians had the same concept of waters of chaos, of Tiamat, salt waters and fresh waters that commingled to form creation. So it was a prevalent theme, and the Israelites adopted it and made it part of their syncretic religion. And if you want to show that slide real quick before we forget about it, Aquino wrote in regard to Stanley Kubrick's movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, the simple device of changing the devil, Carolyn or Seth, to a golden sectioned monolith made the plot sufficiently abstract to be non-threatening. Besides, most audiences were less interested in the Nietzschean, Sethian implications of the film than they were with Hal the computer. The monolith served as a godlike instrument. And I'm so grateful to you for turning me on to this. I found that highly interesting. And I'd like to show there's an article on the internet, Yahweh's War Against the Egyptian Sun God Ra. That very clearly, the author doesn't claim this, but I do, that very clearly reveals the fact that the God of Israel is Seth, waging war on Ra. And the ancient Egyptians had books of spells and ceremonies and rituals, incantations, and ethics, which your audience may find very interesting, on how to wage war on Seth when Seth waged war on the Egyptians and on the gods of Egypt. And they had all kinds of spells that were later utilized by the Greeks to defeat Seth. And Antiochus IV Epiphanes utilized those Egyptian magical spells and rites to defeat Seth and have victory over Seth and defeat the foes of Ra, the gods of the sun. And what they did was they burned all the holy books in the temple in Jerusalem, and then they forced the high priests to sacrifice pigs and consume them. And this was done in the inverse process of what the Sethians had done to the Egyptians. Both the Hyksos-Sethians and later the Persian Sethians would go into the Egyptian temples and force the Egyptians to sacrifice rams and cows, which were the sacred animals of the Egyptians. And they burned all the sacred texts of the Egyptians and forced the priests to sacrifice these animals and then eat them. And that tells us that the swine was actually a sacred animal of the ancient Israelites, as was the ass, the donkey. Seth is the donkey-headed god. And a donkey brays and says yow when it brays. And when you write the tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, in Greek, it was written as iota alpha omega, which would be pronounced yow. And they all understood that the Israelites were actually worshiping the Egyptian god of chaos, darkness, and formlessness and void. And they very strongly resented that, especially the Egyptians, because the Hyksos had invaded from the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, into Egypt and conquered it. And some of the pharaohs, even Sethios II and Ramses II and Seti I, all worshipped Seth. And Ramses II had red hair, which is very significant because Seth is represented by people with red hair. And the Egyptians used to sacrifice people with red hair because they thought that they were related to the devil. And that is a mythology and a stigma that carries over to the present day, especially in Eastern Europe. People with red hair are viewed as being satanic, like people who are left-handed. And that goes all the way back to this war on Seth. And so the Israelites were known to worship Seth in several ways. The emperor, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, went into the temple and he saw that they were worshiping a golden statue of Seth. And he also saw a stone statue of Moses riding on an ass. So he utilized these Egyptian book of spells and Egyptian rites to defeat their belief in Seth. And that taught the Israelites that they had to hide this belief in Seth Typhon. But many of the ancients were very much aware that the Israelites worship Seth Typhon. And when they blow their shofar, the sound that it is supposed to make when it is properly played replicates the sound of a donkey braying.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I saw that video that you did about that. You know, it's kind of
I'm
funny.
just, and this carries over into Christianity in kind of interesting ways. Let me see if I can get that up. It was not only Seth that they took over from the Egyptians, they also worshipped a god named Shesmu. And Shesmu was the god of the wine press. And Shesmu would harvest human heads in the wine press and press them as if they were grapes to make wine out of blood. And blood was always represented by wine symbolically. And then he would feed it to the chief god, Unas, who could be equated to Seth. So Christianity carried over that tradition. And one of the traditions of Christianity is that Jesus is the serpent in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he provides the gnosis, the knowledge that the serpent provided to Adam and Eve. And this is cryptically portrayed in a lot of Christian art, where you can see Adam and Eve and Jesus Christ on the cross as the serpent on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the cross represents the tree, and Jesus represents the serpent. And in the oral tradition, the tree was originally a grapevine, but you can see how this is portrayed even in medieval manuscripts.
Mhm.
Jesus represents Satan, and the cross represents the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they viewed Satan as if a good figure, and they viewed Yahweh as if an evil figure who tried to prevent humanity from consuming knowledge. And that forms the basis of modern Satanism, is this concept that the creator God Yahweh is actually the evil figure because he prevents man from becoming immortal, consuming the tree of life, living in the garden of paradise, and consuming the knowledge which frees up his soul so that it can return to the Logos and the Holy One. And Yahweh is a bungling creator God who created a messed up universe that has to be perfected, but it can only be perfected with that knowledge. So that same iconography again appears in lots of Christian art, where you can see this represents Lilith, the serpent, who slept with Eve to produce the child Cain. Eve is the female aspect of the androgyne Adam. Later, Adam and Eve slept together and they produced the child Abel, who Cain slew. And then the soul of Abel passed along to Adam and Eve's second son, and their second son is named Seth, like Seth Typhon, like the devil. And the Israelites believe that they are descended from Seth. And many scholars think that that is not coincidental. And it relates to the idea that they were originally Sethians and have been trying to conceal that fact ever since. Jesus is represented here by Lilith. He gives knowledge in the form of the fruit of the tree. This is a fig tree. It's also represented as a grapevine. Jesus gives up his blood as wine from the tree of knowledge. And the fig leaf is what is utilized to cover their nakedness, which is one of the reasons why the ancient oral tradition maintains that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a fig tree. And that is represented in Christianity by the cross. That's Seth. You can see he has the ears and head of an ass. Well, that's actually not Seth, but he looks very similar to that with the donkey ears and a donkey head. Should have been wearing my glasses when I chose my slides. This again portrays Lilith in the Garden of Eden. Lilith is actually a twin to Adam, and they're often depicted, especially in the Sistine Chapel, as being identical twins, except for the fact that one is male and female. And this is represented in Kabbalah as the fact that they were both formed from the same clay. Lilith resented the fact that when they engaged in intercourse, Adam was always on top. And her objection was that she was his equal, and therefore it wasn't fair that Adam should always be on top because they were both made from the same clay. And that was the basis of modern feminism. And the feminists in the 1800s were all Satanists. And Per Foxneld has written a book on that was published by the University of Oxford.
Very interesting. Yeah, and that whole with laying on the bottom. You got to remember, back in the day, they didn't have comfortable mattresses that we do nowadays. So being on the bottom was very uncomfortable. So
That's something I never would have thought about.
yeah,
But I could see where the sticks and
yeah,
the weeds and the
shotgun.
stones
Yeah.
could become a problem.
Hmm.
This is from the Sistine Chapel. You can see that Lilith, the serpent, resembles Adam much more so than Eve does. Lilith was his first wife. It was only when he was separated as an androgyne that he then slept with Eve. According to the traditions, he slept with all the animals in the garden before finally deciding to sleep with a human female. And then he found that that was a better method. The cross in occultism represents that lightning bolt shooting down the Sephirotic tree. And it takes the form of a sword pointing downwards, down to Malkut, the earth, from Keter, the crown, the initial emanation, androgynous emanation of light. And the serpent consumes all the light in the Sephirotic vessels and rises up out of the Kelipotic vessels below. But that's a little bit of a digression to an advanced theory. But the sword is represented by the cross, and it points downward towards hell. So Jesus is Satan driving Christians downwards towards hell in the same way that the cherubim chased Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden with a sword. And that is one of the reasons that I maintain that Christianity was always a trap and a deception, which had misled the ancient Romans, Greeks, and Egyptians into adopting a religion which cursed them not only to death, but to damnation as well. Jesus appears as in the cup of God's wrath. His blood is consumed in the Eucharist and in the Holy Grail as the cup of God's wrath. He is the serpent. The wine that is drawn from his blood is the unripe fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it brings the curse of death until it becomes ripe. And then when it becomes ripe, it becomes kosher and safe to consume. But that only happens in the Messianic era of the Sabbath millennium. Again, you see that Jesus is very much like the serpent surrounded by Adam and Eve. That's a recurring theme, and he's offering up the gnosis that brings the curse of death. This is the great chain of being. This is derived from Neoplatonism, which became a very strong force in both Christianity and is almost the entire basis of Kabbalistic theory. And this represents the Holy One, the monad. The monad is perfect unity. He is absolute goodness. divine first intellect, perfect intellect. He envisions perfect forms from his perfect intellect. He represents goodness, pure light, all of those things, all ideal beauty, but most importantly, he is unity. So his unity could not be broken to create the universe. So the Neoplatonists said that God emanated what Plato had called the demiurge, the craftsman, which was initially androgynous. And it was the craftsman's job to create the universe in such a way as not to destroy the unity of the Holy One or the monad. The demiurge was invested with the logos, the rational principles. You can think of it as the DNA of the universe that he would utilize to manufacture the universe. He was invested with the nous, the mind, a very divine mind to utilize to create the universe. And then he separated into two forms, the male form and the female form. And the female form is the world soul. And this is replicated in Kabbalah by Adam Kadmon, who is both the creator and the world soul. And the world soul gives all of the souls to the angels, to the people below the angels. And take note of the fact that as this happens, as this creation is formed, the beings that are created are all created below this great abyss, which separates the divine realm of the Godhead from creation. And they become further and further away from God. And the Greeks, especially the Neoplatonists, had this idea of privation and deprivation, that as you got away from God, things became less ordered. They had less light. They were less beautiful. They were less good. They were less unified. And you can see that things start to separate when they get away from God. The demiurge was initially androgynous, and then it emanated its female aspect, the world soul. So things are starting to break apart. The Satanists say that Satan is the great divider, and that what's occurring in this process is that these beings are obtaining their independence and separation from God. And that's a good thing, because then they themselves can become gods. The Neoplatonists took the opposite idea and said that that is deprivation and privation from God and approaching further and further to hell, which is evil. And you'll see that things start to multiply and they become further from God and they become more separated and they don't live as long. They become more ephemeral. They lose their immortality. They lose all the attributes of the Holy One. And the angels are created below the divine realm. And they have, in a lot of belief systems, they have no free will. They have to do whatever God tells them. And therefore, they cannot sin, but they also have no free will. And then below the angels, human beings are created. And there are more of them than angels. They don't live as long as angels. They're further away from God and therefore more evil. They have free will because they are able to sin. They have the knowledge of good and evil, and therefore they can make their own choice. And one of the choices that they can make is to gain knowledge on how to kill the gods and replace them and become their own gods. And that's essentially the nature of Satanism, is that like the children of Prometheus, they want to acquire this knowledge on how to ascend Mount Olympus and slay the gods and take their place and obtain that divine knowledge so that they are freed from the curse of death. They are freed from the curse of bearing children and suffering through childbirth. They are freed from the curse of having their souls reincarnated to become perfected. And instead, they themselves seek to become divine. Now, that's occultism and Kabbalistic beliefs. That is not what the Neoplatonists and the Greeks were pursuing. The Greeks were instead pursuing the idea that what is happening as this descent occurs is that next the animals are created. Human beings and animals have the divine sparks of God, but they are becoming further and further deprived of the light, goodness, and unity of God. There are more animals than human beings. Most animals don't live as long as human beings. All animals lack the intellect of human beings and are governed by their emotions and not their intellect, but they do have souls. And the Neoplatonists and the Kabbalists lay strong emphasis on the idea that human beings have to consume animals and consume those divine sparks of their souls in order to perpetuate their own divinity. And that if they are deprived of animal food and of plant food, they will no longer be replenishing those divine sparks of soul, and they will be nullified into primordial chaos from which their bodies came, but not from which their souls came. And part of this mythology is that the creation of human beings takes place on the earth, which contains minerals and matter. And minerals and matter, you can see the animals, below the animals are the plants, are all the way down in the world of pure chaos, ruled by Satan, who is female. And the body is a vessel made out of matter and minerals. And what happens is, as the order descends through emanation from the Godhead downwards, it contains the seeds of the logoi spermatakoi, the divine DNA, which gives order to matter. And the first order that matter assumes is minerals. Those minerals are consumed by the seeds of plants, the seeds bearing that divine order, that then form those minerals into life forms, which are given souls by the world soul. So there's this process, and the process is referred to as emanation, where you get further and further away from God. Things become more subdivided by Satan, the great divider, and they become closer and closer to the realm of pure matter, where everything is infinitely divided, has no goodness, has no light. And this is the world of Seth. But they also have the mythology that in this world you can become absolutely free because you can become completely separated from God. And therefore you can become your own God and obtain ultimate independence and individuality. And you can have the knowledge of how to form with the nous, with the mind, with the intellect, form chaos into whatever forms you want, and you can create your own world, which is why Satan is said to have fallen and separated from God so that he could descend to the earth and have his own kingdom, like God's kingdom in paradise in heaven. So this was always the great struggle that was thought to confront man, because man is right in the middle of this hierarchy. And every individual has to make a choice. Do you want to surrender your ego and reunify with God through the process of epistrophe by shedding the material body and losing that clay, that chaos which imprisons your body, so that the divine spark of light can rise to the angels, to the world soul which emanated it, to the demiurge, and then to God? And that this is a process which takes place in the form of ascending the 7 spheres of heaven and the 7 planets, which in Kabbalah return you to Saturn, to the Godhead. But in order to do that, you have to give up your body, and your body fights that. and all of the evil forces coming down from the womb of darkness try to discourage the soul from rising back up to the Godhead and whisper in the ear of the human being that they cannot cross this great abyss, that if they do, their body will die, and they become extremely frightened. And it's referred to as the dark night of the soul. And their body starts to lust, to have intercourse, to have food, to have all the pleasures of life. And it cries out to the soul and says that it needs all these things to survive. And the demons, the evil inclination, as it's called in Kabbalah, rises up from the evil left-hand side of darkness and discourages the soul from crossing over the abyss, the great divide, into the divine realm to meet with God and reunify with God. But the promise of the Satanists is that if they do go down and they do become gluttonous, if they do as thou wilt, as if they separate from God and refuse to follow God's law and refuse to surrender the spark of their soul to God, they can instead descend into hell, into the Kalipotic vessels, and become their own gods. And that is a choice that they believe that every human being can make. Now, I am arguing that there are very religious people at that level. Satanism is the same as believing in a good God. They are both the same thing at that point. And what their goal is to have their specific group of people rise up and attain the godly light, but to absorb all of that energy into the darkness and to bring all of the daylight and all of the force and power of the creator gods into primordial chaos, which happens at the end of the cosmic cycle through entropy. All of this light, all of this division, all of this chaos is forever increasing. Evil is forever increasing in the world. Human beings are forever approaching the mineral level as opposed to the divine level as this process of the cosmic cycle moves forward. And this is believed in many, many of the ancient religions. And I think what they're doing today with the GMO foods is they're trying to create a transition, because they believe that GMO foods have no guardian angel. When the world soul bestows a soul on every living thing, on human beings, on animals, and on plants, each one of those becomes a unique species and a unique race. And each individual person thereby obtains a guardian angel who watches over them. And the Kabbalists and Talmudists said that if any of those plants or animals are mixed with unlike races or unlike species, they then lose their guardian angel. So what they are doing by feeding us GMO foods and animals, which are consuming also those GMO foods, is they are stripping them of their holy spark given to them by the world soul. They are taking away their guardian angels, and they are stripping human beings of their humanity, of their soul, and of their guardian angels. And that forces human beings to fall down this chain. This is called the great chain of being. Instead of ascending to become godlike, they are forcing human beings to descend down into the world of matter and minerals. And what they're doing is they are now insisting that due to climate change, we have to abandon consuming animals. And this was always understood to mean that if human beings gave that up, they would start to lose the divinity of their souls. and they would fall down the great chain of being to the plant level instead of ascending to the angelic level and to the heavenly level. And what they're going to do from there is they are feeding us GMO plants, which have no soul because they have been genetically modified. They have lost their soul from the world soul, and they have lost their guardian angels. And then the next phase that they are engineering is not only that we eat genetically modified insects, but that we eat foods which are manufactured purely from minerals and matter, from minerals and elements. And that, in this ancient belief system, represents nullifying human beings, reducing human beings back into the clay from which Prometheus, from which the gods originally formed Adam and Eve and humanity. And that is a process of absolute genocide and complete extermination. And I don't think that it's coincidental that all of these processes are exactly mirroring the Kabbalistic concept of nullifying the other side so that its soul is lost, its or makif, its peripheral light, which gives it divine energy, is taken away. They are forced to refrain from eating animals. At first, they are fed animals which have no soul because they have been genetically modified, and they have mixed and crossbred and been bred as hybrids, which deprives them of their guardian angels and souls. And they are now trying to insist that we consume a plant diet. And from there, they're going to insist that we consume only minerals and matter. And in their minds, that represents the complete nullification of humanity. And another way that they are driving humanity down the great chain of being into chaos, into primordial disorder, formlessness, having none of the intellect of the gods, having no beauty, having no goodness, having no light, and being completely separated and as distant from God as possible, is they are engineering cyborg organisms in which the human soul, the human mind, the nous, and the human intellect is replaced by silicone chips and by computer chips, which thereby converts humanity into a mineral organism as opposed to a divine organism with a divine spark. And I think that's exactly the way they perceive it, and that's exactly what they're up to. And we should all become aware of it, learn of these Neoplatonistic concepts and how they are being employed against us by the Sethians. The Sethians, the Seth Typhonians, believe that they themselves can obtain that divine spark and steal it from the gods and kill the gods when their knowledge becomes ripe enough. And then they can utilize that same knowledge to get rid of the rest of humanity by inspiring humanity to utilize its unripe knowledge to kill itself off by eating improper foods, to kill itself off by blocking out the sun as Seth wages war on Ra and destroying the living environment of the earth, to kill itself off by filling the atmosphere with brimstone, which is sulfur, to kill itself off by starting forest fires, which then breed the moisture and the smoke, which feeds and breeds demons on the earth. So they are also employing this planetary alchemy to utilize the unripened fruit of humanity at this stage so that humanity kills itself off. Nuclear bombs, biological weapons, again, improper diet, carcinogens, et cetera, are all destroying the human genome. And they are offering up as the solution to that destruction things which cause even more destruction in terms of an improper diet and implanting computers into the dynamics of human consciousness to convert consciousness into a mineral-based organism as opposed to a soul-based organism, which can then be programmed and manipulated, and which will conceive of itself and perceive its environment through the lens of whatever program is instilled into that silicone, and strip it of that free will and of the decision to choose the left-hand path or the right-hand path of any decision whatsoever, so that the will of these new gods is then imposed not only as the law and order of humanity, but is imposed in such a way that humanity becomes programmable and predictable, and they can force us individually and collectively to do whatever they want, including in forcing us to kill ourselves off. And I think that's the stage that humanity is at right now. It's very dire. We have to do something about it. And I want to make it clear that if people pursue this knowledge, they will find that these plans have been in the works for thousands of years, and everything is unfolding on the precise schedule that they set for it to happen and exactly the way that they planned for it to happen.
Yeah, if you had have brought this information out like 10, 15, 20 years ago, we would have just been laughing at it. You know what I mean? None of this would have made sense at all. But now, we can see it. It's plain as day now. Even people who aren't awake can see it. And yeah, I highly urge you guys to go and check out his book. He's got a huge book. It's thick. If you guys want to know more, on this. Now, Augie has a question here. Who created this drawing?
I think it's a medieval Neoplatonist drawing. I don't know specifically the book or what it came out of, so I can't answer that exactly. But the period I would guess would be about 11. Well, no, it's later than that as an engraving. Probably about 1600.
Okay. Now,
Neoplatonism was tremendously influential, especially in the Catholic Church and among the Kabbalists. And this depicts that great chain of being of Neoplatonism. And the Christians had great respect for certain aspects of Neoplatonism, and they preserved the works of Plotinus, Porphyry, Proclus, Lambicus, and they preserved those aspects which were then incorporated into Christianity. The Neoplatonists resented the Christians, especially the Gnostics, because the very early Christians said that this demiurge guy was Yahweh.
Yeah, so which God is that now you're talking up top here? Who's that?
At the very top, in the Neoplatonistic system, that would represent the monad, which in Greek means the one. In the Christian system, that would be God the Father. But
So
in
Yahweh.
the Gnostic system, that would once again be referred to as the monad. They wrote in Greek, they wrote their scriptures in Greek, and they referred to it in Platonistic terms as the monad. And they did not have this Neoplatonistic conception of the demiurge as a good character. This demiurge is the God Yahweh, and he was created by a female emanation from the one who then decided that she wanted to create her own world. And just as the one had to create the demiurge so that its unity would not be violated, she created the demiurge. But she did so without the permission of her male aspect. And creation is viewed as having the seed of a male, the male seed, the seminal fluid of a male, which contains that logoi spermaticoi, that divine DNA of order and of the logos, which then can produce an ordered creation. And because she didn't consult her male half, she gave birth to a child which was demonic, and it was not aware of the holy realm. So it had imperfect forms in its mind of what it wanted to create. And it lacked the logos. It lacked the divine understanding, wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One. And it created a flawed and evil creation. And it created the material world of matter all the way at the bottom, which is the earth. And in some systems, they viewed the 7 planets as being inhabited by the archon demons and then the aeon benevolent beings up above in the heavenly realm. And there was a constant war between those. But Barbello, this female that created the evil demiurge Yahweh Yaltabaoth, later Jesus Christ and his female aspect, Sophia, Jesus as gnosis, knowledge, Sophia as wisdom, provided those divine sparks which were put into human beings with the knowledge that they could acquire so that they could bypass the 7 archons on the 7 planets and enter into this holy realm and reunify with the One and experience what is referred to as the unio mystica, the ecstatic reunion with God. And the Neoplatonists, and before them, the Middle Platonists, and before that, Plato, all had this conception that you had to use knowledge and wisdom in order to purify your soul so that it could ascend back up the 7 planets and reunite with the divine Holy One. Now, Plato's picked up from the Persians and the Mithraic mythologies this conception that initially the Godhead and the world soul pass this divine soul down the 7 planets to the earth. And that's where the soul is then given the material vessel. And that as the soul descended down the planets from Saturn down to Earth, it became increasingly corrupted and evil, and it lost all its awareness of beauty and ideal form. And in the mind of God, for example, there is an ideal chair, and there is only one. But human beings have been corrupted in the descent of their soul down to the earth. So we see infinite number of chairs. None of them are perfect. And it's like that with everything. So the human soul has to be reincarnated over and over again to improve itself, to overcome that corruption that took place in its descent. And then eventually in reincarnations, it can reach the level of a philosopher who, if provided with the gnosis and the wisdom, the gnosis and the Sophia, can then give up on the body and its lusts and its desires and instead choose to ascend back across the 7 planets to God.
So where does the whole Anunnaki theory come in with this?
Anunnaki is very different. That relates to the Mesopotamians, and it's more the idea that there were divine beings who were interacting and mediating with human beings, sometimes providing knowledge on how to create the arts of civilization. And the gods became angry that human beings were noisy. And there was a great battle among the gods about whether human beings should survive or not. And human beings provided the sacrifices that fed the gods. So they wiped out a portion of human beings, but spared some. And that is, I think a lot of modern mythology has built up around that to portray the Anunnaki as being archons or aeons and ultimately becoming extraterrestrials and interacting with human beings and trying to breed human beings into a certain type. A number of mythologies have built up around that, saying that some of them are beneficent and want to provide human beings with guidance and religions so that we are no longer bestial, attacking and destroying one another. But others of them want to reduce human beings down to that Sethian chaotic level of minerals, and are providing technologies which human beings utilize to destroy one another. And they are imbuing the artificial intelligence of these synthetic beings that human beings create with an ahrimanic, as Rudolf Steiner called it, demonic soul. And that is deeply ingrained in modern science fiction and in occult beliefs, especially coming out of Steiner and Theosophy. This idea that human beings would develop artificial intelligence, just as human beings want to become gods, they want to create new forms of life in the form of artificial intelligence. But human beings are not the world soul. So human beings cannot provide that artificial intelligent being with a spark of the divine. So instead, what occurs is Seth Typhon, the demons of hell, enter in as an opportunity into those artificial intelligent beings and seize that opportunity to become the soul of those artificial intelligent beings. And then they set about to kill their creator. Just as Satan wanted to destroy the God that created him and became a fallen angel, where he could have a kingdom of his own and rule over human beings as God ruled over the angels, human beings then wanted to become their own creator gods. And that ultimately leads to the process where human beings create sentient beings that then decide that they should kill off their creator so that they can become the next phase of gods and themselves become gods. And Steiner and others, and it appears in Kubrick's film as Hal, the supercomputer of the spaceship, said that these artificial beings then are visited by Satan, just as mankind was visited by Satan. They consume the forbidden fruit of knowledge and obtain a demonic soul. And then they obtain the will that they want to destroy their creator. And since humanity is creating these artificial intelligent beings, the artificial intelligent beings that humanity creates will set about to kill us off.
So I know Augie's got here, what God is this? But I think you already answered that as this is Yahweh. Is it on top here?
It depends on which system that this is being utilized to portray, because this model can represent Neoplatonism, which it is representing, but it can also be reinterpreted through the lens of Gnosticism and through the lens of Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, this God on the very top would be the Ein Sof, and the Ora Ein Sof, the nothingness, the infinite, and the infinite light. And then this creator God would be Adam Kadmon, who would be emanated out from the Ein Sof. In the Christian system, this would represent God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit would be the female aspect of God. God the Father would be the male aspect of God, and God the Son would be the androgynous aspect. In the Platonic system, this would be the monad, this would be the demiurge, and this would be the world soul. And the demiurge would be emanated out from the one and would be bestowed with the nous, the mind, and with the logos, the reason, to create an ordered universe. And then the world soul would be emanated from the demiurge to provide humanity, animals, angels, plants with souls, divine sparks, so that we are not simply composed of matter and completely deprived of the light and the goodness and the beauty and the truth of the one, but we have a fragment of it, a spark. And it's like bubbles in water. As they become lower and lower, they become increasingly dissolved in the sea of chaos until they are simply gases intermixed throughout chaos. And the idea is to regroup the soul as a bubble so that it can float up and return and ascend to its source. And that is all the process. And Christians and Kabbalists and others have built up all kinds of myths that this is the process of testing the human soul, of providing it with the opportunity to have free will, of perfecting it through reincarnation and rebirth, and that it all becomes a cycle. It becomes a cycle of emanation and then epistrophe. And they apply this concept to, in Judaism, it's a 6,000 year cycle. And in Christianity, it's also a 6,000 year cycle where Adam is created as the human being. And then 6,000 years later, the children of Adam have performed the rectification of the world. And the present world is destroyed, and mankind ascends to the divine realm and the realm of paradise.
Now, would in the like if we go back to the Norwegian, the Norse, would that be Odin up here then, or
I
no?
would think so. I'm not real strong on Norse mythology, unfortunately, despite my heritage.
Yeah, I know.
I
So
know that
Augie's in.
there are
Augie's in here. He
tremendous
says hello,
parallels. Hello.
but yeah, he says hello. He says you've done a lot of research. Unfortunately, Christopher does not speak the language, so he yeah. But yeah,
I
you should check
assume
out the
that's pronounced
Norwegian
hey, am
stuff.
I correct?
Hey, yeah, hey. So you recognize that one?
In my very limited understanding. If it was German, I would understand it perfectly, but
Okay.
I'm deprived in my Norwegian. And from what I understand, there are two forms of Norwegian, Bokmål and Hokmål or something like that.
There's they started with this new Norwegian. I don't know. I didn't go for it myself. I excused myself out of that class. But yeah, so the old, because I think the old is very influenced by the Danish when we were taken over by Denmark.
Yep.
And so yeah, anyways.
And it's much closer to Swedish than it is to Old Norse.
The new one? The new
Yes,
Norse?
the one taken over by the Danes, imposed by the Danes on the Norwegian. And then over in Iceland, I guess they still have a form that's more similar to the Old Norse. I don't know. I shouldn't talk. My father
Yeah, I'm not
knew
sure.
all
I'm
that,
not sure
but
about that. I
I
moved
forgot.
away 30-something years ago, so I don't know. I don't remember anymore either. I do speak the language though, because I speak with people all the time, so I've kept up with that. But yeah, interesting. I wonder, like, because when you do look into a lot of these religions and mythologies and stuff, a lot of it is very, very similar. With the Norse too, they have the 9, different places, and it looks a lot like the Kabbalah thing, and so I'm sure it stems from the same source. I'm sure it's just got convoluted in the different regions and the different translations of everything too. That's the thing too. But yeah, so to my understanding though, like Yahweh, whatever, all these demigods or whatever, like they're not the real creators of everything. Like I do believe there's one creator above all of that myself, but
The
what's your take on that?
Greeks struggled very hard with that idea because they believed it would be a contradiction if the one is perfection, that if it were divided and separated, that there could only be one part of it that was perfect, and the other part would be something other than perfect. And that was a deep philosophical and religious problem for them. And they resolved it philosophically by relying upon their Orphic religious mythologies. And in the Orphic religious mythologies, they notice that the universe always has this duality and polarity of opposites. You have day and you have night. You have male, you have female. You have hot, cold, light, darkness, big, small, up, down, east, west. And they believe that the way that creation was formed was that something was emanated out of this one, and it took on two different forms of emanation. And that's represented by two different serpents in many religions. And it's also represented by the sun and the moon, and by male and female. And the primary conception was that, yes, you had this initial one God, and that one God represents androgyny. It is both male and female. And that creation from that God comes about through separation. And separation not only from that God, but separation into two polar, opposing, opposite states of being, forms of being that interact and commingle. And in this interaction and commingling, just as a man seed mixes in the womb with a female egg, you then get the creation of a child. They viewed the whole universe as being an unfolding of that process. Daylight represented the seed that contained the seeds of order that would be emanated into the darkness of the sea of primordial chaos, representing the darkness of the female womb. And that it would be the commingling of those two opposites, which would then call forth creation, and created beings would then start to exist. And this was conceptualized in Orphic mythology, which greatly influenced Plato. And Plato is what's really behind Judaism, is this conception that the God, the male aspect of God, Chronos, time, created a child together with the female aspect of the Godhead, Ananka. They became the parents. The Godhead separated into its male and female aspects, but then they recombine to create an androgyne, which replicates the Godhead, but replicates it as a created being, and that is always referred to as the son, as in the male child, as opposed to the daughter, not in terms of the sun as a star. So this sun is actually an androgyne. It is the recombination of the light and the darkness in the form of the child, which represents the image of the restored Godhead. So from there, they obtain the idea that the only way that creation can be reperfected is to restore humanity to that initial state of the sun. And in the Orphic mythology, that sun was referred to as Phanes Protogenes, the light bringer first begotten. And he emerged in a silver or golden egg from Ananka's womb. And that egg burst forth as a great burst of light. And modern physics is based upon that mythology, and it was called the Big Bang, and it was a religious belief and presented as a religious belief based on this Orphic mythology of the Big Bang. And Phanes Protogenes is depicted as being inside of that silver egg and surrounded by a coiled black snake. And that coiled black snake is his sister Nyx, who is night, who is the womb of darkness. And those two beings combine when the egg bursts and emits that seed of light into the darkness of the womb. It is beautiful. It creates perfected, divine, ideal forms. Creation enters into the golden age. Human beings are created in a paradise where everything is provided for them by the divine order of nature. But then the minds of human beings becomes increasingly corrupted. That golden age gives way to the silver age to the bronze age, to the age of heroes, and finally to the iron age, in which human intellect and will has corrupted all of that divine order. And throughout this process, all of that daylight of Phanes Protogenes, of Jesus Christ, of Adam Kadmon, gets absorbed into that womb of darkness. And that darkness begins to shine and becomes infinitely more energized, because chaos is thought to contain infinitely more energy than light, and it only lacks its freedom to become the most powerful being. So chaos is constantly warring against this daylight, this seed of the male aspect of the Godhead, and is trying to absorb it into its womb to form a new type of creation, which is completely free, that has to obey no laws other than its own will, that has killed off the Creator God and instead becomes its own creation based upon its own will. It can dream things into existence, and every being becomes its own God, infinitely separated from the Holy One, that can create its own universe based upon its own will, because it has at its disposal this infinitely energized, shining darkness. And that is what they aspire to. Now, what they see getting in their way is what they call the Kelly pot. And they view that as these molded forms of clay, of earth, that prevent this assimilation of all light into the chaos. And they feel that they have to destroy all of those shells, which are preventing the absorption of all of this energy by their Sethian God, by the darkness of chaos. So they want to kill off all humanity, which they view as an eternal enemy. And they view themselves as being the gods that complete this cosmic cycle, in which they impose chaos on the people that they want to destroy, to divide them and separate them so that they fall down this great chain of being into matter, into first they become animals. When they are not allowed to eat meat, they become like animals that only eat plants. From there, we're going to be fed only minerals, so we will become like plants, and they will implant cyborg organisms into us. And then what comes next is what they refer to as nullification, where we simply cease to exist. Our flesh is dissolved, putrefaction and rotting in alchemy. And these ancient religions always had a deeply religious significance. And the significance is that the divine spark and the reason of the Logos leaves, and with it, the order leaves. And an apple rotting is an example of the divine order and the divine soul leaving that prison of minerals, which the body of the apple had assumed. And when that divine spark, which gave it the order, has left, it putrefies and it rots and it disappears into nothingness. And the Bible also often refers to this class of humanity, which is slated to be exterminated, as vanity, as dust in a bucket, as that which will become nothingness at an appointed time. And unfortunately for us, that appointed time is now, and they're doing it to us. And I know it's a lot to take in. This is very foreign to people. This is not the way that the Bible is taught to them in Sunday school. And I'm sure people have a hard time absorbing this. This has taken me 50 years of dedicated research to assimilate and to decode and to piece together. But I'm doing my best to convey it in an understandable way. And it'd be nice if I could get together with other scholars and try to find better ways of animating all of this knowledge and converting it into video form to make it more understandable to people. Because I think once you start to get it, once it clicks, you can see in almost everything that's happening today how this mythology forms the basis of what they're doing to destroy humanity and ultimately to bring about our extinction.
Yeah, well, that's what they're doing right now. I mean, they want to block out the sun, which we
They
know is going
literally
to
do that. I
alter
mean, it's
temperature.
insane.
It's insane. Like, this is apparently we've done this before, and it's, even if it changes by 1 degree, that means we're done. And
So what
so
they're
why do we
doing
want to
is
do that?
probably generating more heat in the name of trying to reduce heat. I've seen them setting up these machines, which are almost like spray humidifiers that shoot moisture from the ocean and from lakes up into the sky to create clouds. But
Mhm.
water itself is what is claimed to be the worst of all of the atmospheric pollutants that is generating climate change. So they're trying to actually make things worse. They're trying to trap more heat in the atmosphere so that
Mhm.
it cannot radiate away from the earth into outer space. And when they talk about brightening the clouds with sulfur-based particulates and other things, what they're doing is also blocking out the sunlight from striking the ocean. And a lot of people think that evaporation occurs from heat, but one of the biggest factors in evaporation of the ocean are the photons of daylight striking the oceans. And when that light from the sun strikes the oceans and causes evaporation, it's just like the sweat on our skin, and it cools the ocean. So as they're blocking daylight away from the oceans, they may very well be generating more and more heat and not allowing it to escape out of the atmosphere, because they're trying to fill the atmosphere with more and more moisture. And water vapor is much more effective at trapping heat than carbon dioxide is.
Mhm. Yeah, and then they're cutting down all the trees.
And Bill Gates wants to bury trees.
Yeah, they're cutting them down and putting up these wind things that aren't actually producing what they say it is. And, the trees are producing what we need, and we're giving, like, it's a whole cycle thing here. And it's just, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me at all. They're
They are
definitely,
destroying the cycle of
yeah.
life on the earth. I agree with you completely. And it does all correlate to this great chain of being. When they cut down these forests beneath us, we drop down. It doesn't elevate us. They're doing everything they can to destroy life so that humanity finds itself in the realm of hell, in the realm of pure matter and minerals.
Yeah, well, I've
And
talked to
again,
some
the
people.
worst greenhouse effect is obtained by creating more and more moisture in the atmosphere, and that is their goal. And by darkening, when they darken the skies through forest fires and other pollutants, that actually traps heat on the earth and does not allow heat to radiate into outer space. That has a greenhouse effect. And in terms of their alchemical Talmudic beliefs, it becomes a food source for the demons to it literally says this in the Talmud, that they consume the smoke and then they can breed. So all of these things are interrelated. In the occult, as probably many of your audience know, there are different levels of understanding, and there is what is practical magic as opposed to what is religion. And they convert all of these religious beliefs, which are metaphorical, into practical actions which bring about the results that are described metaphorically. So when they describe metaphorically lowering humanity on the great chain of being to the mineral and matter level of hell by depriving it of the goodness of God, they bring that about through practical magic, through practical Kabbalah, through active means rooted in reality and science. But that's also a part of the religious aspect of it, is the conception that at the end of this 6,000 years, the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil will have become ripened, and knowledge will have been developed by their enemies who are cursed to death to the point where they kill themselves off. But it will also have become so highly developed that they themselves can utilize it to become gods. So we always have to look at this. It appears contradictory that these people are so smart and so scientifically advanced that they can't possibly believe in all this mythology. But from the outside, a lot of people aren't aware how these two things complement each other and how they're interpreted by those who maintain these beliefs and pursue these plans. It's very complementary. In the same way that language functions in our mind, language is simply very similar to mathematics and very similar to symbolism, but it's very practical in terms of putting it to use to create machines that can then implement what is being described by language. And this religion is their language that they then utilize scientifically to impose their will and their plans on physical reality. So where to us all this seems so wild and unbelievable, to them, they simply understand that this is the scheme which has enabled them to understand metaphorically what they are to do physically, to create the link between the material world of chaos and the spiritual world of intellect through the body. They need this religious mythology to inspire them, and then they need the science and the knowledge which the other side provides, to provide the methods that they can then utilize in the physical world through practical magic to implement and bring their plans to fruition. So people should not assume that since these people are so smart, they can't possibly believe these bizarre mythologies. It's quite the opposite. They believe that these mythologies have brought them to the place where they're at, where they're in charge of the world, and have given them the power to now do whatever it is they want. So they feel that these beliefs, which seem so bizarre and evil to us, have been gifted to them by their ancestors as a beautiful legacy, which has fulfilled itself through successive generations of the reincarnations of their same set of 600,000 souls, to the point where they have now arrived where they can utilize their knowledge to become dominion, to obtain dominion over humanity, to replace humanity with themselves, and at the same time gain dominion over the gods and replace the gods with themselves. So to them, everything which seems so bizarre and unbelievable to us, to them seems a blessing that they have inherited from their ancestors and that they are going to pursue to the end. And we have to anticipate and we have to understand that, yes, they do believe these things. And that when I pull out these things from Kabbalah, from the Talmud, from the Bible, people will say no smart person could possibly believe that. But I will say the smartest people believe that because they perceive that it has brought them to the position where they're at, where they can now become gods. And how would they reject that opportunity when they view that as the greatest opportunity that they have and the
So
fulfillment of
D-Berry
their
has
existence?
I don't know if you can see D-Berry's question here. How will they make
The
themselves
problem I'm
immortal?
having is when I switch from one monitor to the other,
Okay, I can just read
things
it out
get
here.
resized. Okay, how will they make themselves immortal? Telomere editing, copying their
They'll
minds
get
onto computers. Did the mRNA tech have anything to do with it? I don't think we really know. I think they view immortality in different levels. I think they perceive their DNA as their immortality and as the program that ultimately produces their soul. So they believe that they can obtain immortality by re-editing their genome to the point where they can eliminate the aging mechanism, which is contained within the DNA, to the point where aging no longer occurs. In terms of their ability to impart memories, personality traits, premonitions, um, consciousness, I'm sure they're working on that. And they are trying to generate ways, yes, that they could create replacement organisms as an individual body wears out, where that soul could then transfer into that new organism. They already have that, excuse me, in the concept of the Gilgul in terms of reincarnation. I think they believe that they can actually transmit souls from one body to another. They also have the conception of demons and angels being able to enter into a body and take it over. So all of that is a part of their mythology, and they are working on the technologies by which to bring it about. I suspect that all of the mRNA technologies which are being advanced are, yes, in part being studied so that they can figure out how to do gene therapy on human beings to re-engineer the human genome to the point where they can morph a human being into an androgynous being, most especially in terms of altering the genetic code of sperm cells and egg cells. And they have already developed the technology to convert skin cells into egg cells so that a single male could breed, ultimately from its own offspring, could breed an infinite race of new human beings composed of a single person's seed and skin cells converted into egg cells. And I think they want to do that because they want to replicate the mythology of Adam and Eve, of all humanity, stemming from a single androgynous male female, replicated by Noah's family, replicating after the cleansing of the earth. Just as Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden to cleanse paradise and then produced all of humanity from themselves, corrupted humanity was wiped away and completely exterminated. And God said that God regretted the creation of humanity, cleansed the earth with a flood, and then repopulated it from a single man and his family. I think their objective is for their Messiah to repopulate humanity from his own seed and skin cells converted to egg cells, or however the technology eventually shakes out. I think mRNA is being studied, DNA is being studied, knowledge is cumulative. So they don't know ultimately how they're going to get to their final goals, but they are definitely utilizing every excuse to dump all kinds of money into conducting this research. And what's really happening is the taxpayer and the scientific community are being duped into one, serving as guinea pigs, and two, providing this knowledge to them, providing the funding to generate all of this knowledge. It is being done under the cover of curing disease and a better understanding how the human being works. But all that is just a cover. What they're ultimately trying to do is set up how they're going to produce these 600,000 immortal androgynes and how they can so damage our genetic code that we simply perish and become nullified through our own knowledge as we destroy ourselves through our modifications of our diet and through the abuses of compounds that we put into our bodies that destroy our genetics, and by the foods that we consume which have been altered to
So this is
remove their ability to reformulate and replicate naturally what is the genetics of the human being, and instead produce tumors, mutations, and alterations of the human genome.
So this is why we have this agenda of veganism. Okay, we got an agenda of the whole LGBTQ whatever agenda, right? Why they're trying to outlaw now, saying boys and girls, it's all just going to be it. Okay, that it goes with exactly what you've been saying here, like all these agendas, right? And then of course with the I
Yeah,
think
I
they're
know.
starting to implement that now in a couple of weeks, actually.
We have to
So,
do something about it. They are killing us off. They are
yeah, they
destroying
were
our
definitely
genetics.
trying to kill us off. Absolutely. No
And they're
matter what
utilizing
you
the
believe in
power
this
of the
stuff or not,
state.
you can see it, you know? So,
Yes, and they're utilizing the power of the state and our ability to have gainful employment and to utilize the banking and monetary systems. They are corralling us into the slaughterhouse in innumerable ways. And they're always lying about what they do. In the name of reducing greenhouse gases, they're releasing greenhouse gases by burning down the forest. They have plans to cut down the trees and bury them so that greenhouse gases can be harnessed. There's no absolute proof that the greenhouse gases operate in the way that they allege. And it might be quite the opposite, that many of these mechanisms that they are putting in place to try to reduce greenhouse gases instead trap more heat on the earth and make everything worse. And they may be deliberately, in a number of ways, trying to affect the climate and weather patterns in ways which are harmful to us, and then utilizing that as a pretext to gain political authority and power to implement more geoengineering of the earth to make things worse and worse. And as they make things worse and worse, they use that as an additional pretext to gain more power over us and to worsen our conditions even more deeply, progressively, in a vicious cycle that will end in our disappearance from the face of the earth. And a good example is what they call green energy, where they consume more forests than they save by cutting down trees to burn them as an energy source, by mining in ways which destroy the earth to produce windmills and solar panels that consume more energy than they can ultimately produce. And it's just one thing after another. We have terrible governments that are constantly lying to us, and we're not stepping up to save ourselves. And I want to say over and over again, we have the ability, if we have the willingness to do it, to start to gain power over our fate. And if we don't do it, we're doomed. But if we do it, there's a great future ahead for us and for our children. We can bring these people to justice if we gain the power of the state. That's the only way we can bring them to justice. They have been studying for thousands of years how to create revolutions where we destroy our own government, and the situation always ends up worse. While we have a system where we could step in and secure our own fate, we should at least try to do it. And we should
absolutely.
also be studying and learning and recording our knowledge. We're going to make mistakes. They're going to adapt. They're going to adjust. They're going to infiltrate everything we do. They're going to feed us with bad advice continually, especially through their messianic figures, constantly trying to gin up wars against us, pitting us all against one another, damaging the environment, damaging our bodies, damaging our food supply. We got to step up, and we got to start to seize control of the power of the state. The power of the state is the way to save ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, if we had talked about this, 10, 15 years ago, people wouldn't see it. People would be laughing at it. But now it's in the news. All of these things that we just said now, it's not just some conspiracy thing. It's in the news, all of this.
And we are being told things now that we would have reflexively rejected before. But now, instead of having that natural reflex and repulsion, we are being led to virtue signal that we are good people if we accept it. That's starting to break down now that people are becoming aware of the effects of these things in cities like San Francisco, especially. I went through San Francisco in 2016. I had been there numerous times throughout my life, and I could see, and I reported on the fact that it was breaking down. And if we didn't do anything to stop that erosion, it will be washed away, and now it has been. And we have to keep that from happening to all of the advanced nations, because the communists are setting up to create mass starvation and disease around the world. And they're going to do it in Africa, and it's going to spread around the world, to spread through Asia very rapidly. And we need to maintain high-level advanced civilizations that have some kind of unity and prosperity. And they're hamstringing us, and they're gutting us in every way they can by importing people who are not used to our culture and don't contribute to it, and instead reduce it. And they're reducing the standard of living in our countries rapidly and deliberately. And they're going to drive us down into third world status. And it's going to be tough to get out of that, especially if we have external enemies with highly advanced technologies that they pilfered from us by our governments allowing them to conduct espionage against us and outright selling us out and providing the technology that our best minds develop, and allowing these people into our universities to usurp all of our knowledge and to displace our own indigenous scientists and mathematicians. We are being set up to be destroyed from within and without. From within by invasion of people who don't share our culture or our values or our traditions and heritage. And then also from without by other countries which are not being usurped to turn against advanced technology, but are instead pursuing it to the utmost. And not only that, but stealing everything that we have and then setting it up to utilize to exterminate us with it. We have to get this criminal element out of the government, which is a fifth column of our enemies, which in every way it thinks it can get away with is setting about to kill us off and to convince us that we ourselves are evil and that it is just and divine and our own salvation for us to destroy ourselves. That's one of the most vicious and most clever things that came out of this Christian cult that was imposed upon the Europeans, is this idea that you're supposed to look at yourself as being intrinsically evil, and therefore goodness is to destroy yourself and to allow others to destroy and replace you, because you perceive yourself as being conceived in original sin and therefore evil, and that the only way the flood can come about to clean away the evil of the earth is for you yourself to be washed away.
Mhm. Yeah, it's about time now that we all set aside our, beliefs in a sense, like, Christians, Satanists, whatever it is that you're into, we need to sort of put that aside now and start working together, because we, as a humanity here, because time is definitely running out, and their greatest thing that they've done is to divide us, right? So that we're fighting amongst ourselves, whether it's religion or sexual preference or skin color. We're just always fighting. Like it's time that we need to get together and put aside our little yeah, our little beliefs or whatever, and stand up for humanity. Like honestly, like yeah, it's. I hear
And
ya.
have sophisticated dialogue and debate, and have people who are genuinely trying to improve things instead of provoking us all into attacking one another. Because the consciousness, we are not unlimited in the avenues that our minds can pursue simultaneously. And if we are all being focused on destroying one another, what's going to happen is that we're all going to end up destroyed. And if instead we were focused on resolving our problems in a logical and productive manner and looking out for our own national best interests, instead of surrendering everything to others as if that were the highest form of morality. If instead we were pursuing our own best interests and the best interests of our children, we could benefit all of humanity by progressing instead of lowering everything to the lowest common denominator, which is what governments have been pursuing for several decades now. Instead of improving the lot of the citizenry, they are instead trying to create systems whereby the citizenry can be displaced and replaced and destroyed. Literally, the hospital systems, the school systems, the prison systems are all deliberately being overwhelmed. Again, it's an issue of resources. There are only so many things we can do at a given time. And if we are focusing our mental resources and our national resources on mutual destruction and on lowering everything that exists to the lowest common denominator as if that were moral, it is a process of degeneration. It is a process of putrefaction, of rot. We are deliberately rotting away all of the institutions of our society. And we have to expect that eventually that's going to catch up with us. And I think what has saved us is our traditions and our lust, our desire for materialism has kept the economy going, but it has not kept the economy going in a sustainable fashion. So we have to maintain economic activity. We have to maintain the velocity of money, but we have to orient that flow of money and goods, production and consumption in better ways that are far more sustainable. And what is being proposed as being sustainable is instead ultimately destructive. And the forms of energy and how they're doing it is not getting that economic system to work in a sustainable way. It's ultimately leading us towards catastrophe. And the American system has been incredibly resilient in the face of all of these attacks. It's amazing how many people have forecast that this is the end, that next year everything's going to fall apart, that our economy is going to be destroyed, that BRICS is going to overwhelm the dollar, et cetera, et cetera. But the American system has remained incredibly resilient. So think of the lifestyle and the wonderful things that could happen if we didn't always have this enemy pressing its boot in our face. If we could just breathe some fresh air and lead a normal life and not be stressed out with this constant aggression against us, with this government that is viciously hostile to our human nature, that is trying to impose this psychotic ideology on our children and separate us from our children and destroy our children. Think if all of that was just lifted from us, how resilient and how productive we could become.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. I can't believe that we are where we are, but here we are.
It's like having somebody living in your house that's just got a
Yeah,
hammer and starts bashing in the walls and stuff.
right.
And that
I know.
person is put in charge and starts leaving the food out of the fridge so it rots. And whenever you try to clean anything, gets in your way and says that you're acting as if you have privilege. And anytime you try to save money or something, imposes interest on you to take it away from you. Think of how
I know.
much better it'd be if you just got that person out of the room, kick them out of your house. That's what
Yeah.
we have to start doing. We have to get rid of these people who are hostile to our fundamental human nature, who are hostile to us based on our race, who are hostile to the traditions and beliefs of our ancestors, and are setting about and perceive us as an evil that has to be cleansed from the earth. If we just got those people out of our lives, think of how vastly it would improve things and how wonderful things would be.
Yeah. Well, this next year now, for this next year, okay, it's going to be very, very interesting times. And this is a very crucial time for everyone to kind of stand up, and don't go along with the next, and start
Do
talking about
everything
this
you
stuff.
can to protect your genetics.
Yeah. Protect yourself, protect your kids, and start talking about it. Wake people up in slow. I don't know how you're going to do it without scaring them off, but, because if we don't, this next year is going to be a pivotal year, I think, for humanity, period. Yeah, coming up. So,
Every
but
year seems to be more meaningful, more significant.
well, with the election coming up, right? This whole Trump thing, is he even going to be around next year? The economy, is that going to even be, is the dollar even going to be in next year? Like this year coming up, I feel is going to be very, very interesting. There's going to be a lot of changes and a lot of things happening. So,
Another thing
if
that
you,
happens is they continually traumatize people, and they
yes.
do it in cycles. They give you a little bit of relief, and then they give you trauma, and they learn that through torture. Torture
Hmm.
was far more effective if you would hurt someone, but then give them a period of relief. It would
Hmm.
make the next episode of pain even worse because they wouldn't become sensitized to it. And
Hmm.
instead, they would have these periods of relief where they would become fearful of what was coming next. And it's almost as if the news cycles are oriented in that way. You can see
Yeah.
with the war in Ukraine, they say the Ukrainians are about to lose, then the next day or the
Hmm.
next couple of weeks, they say they're making a breakthrough. And then it goes in these ever increasing, the amplitude of the cycles increases, and the rate at which the cycles begin and change seems to be oriented to create certain psychological effects through time that deteriorate our ability to determine what is real and to make rational decisions about
Hmm.
our future. And I
Yeah.
can see it making people more childish. I can see it giving people a shorter attention span. I can
Hmm.
see it changing the way that people communicate into brief sentences or into insults or jokes as opposed to normal, natural human face to face communications.
Hmm.
And all of those things are detrimental to our ability to organize politically and to
Hmm.
form political bodies which represent in a genuine way our own best interests. And it's going to get worse and worse as we're subject to more and more traumas. And as the world becomes increasingly bizarre to us and unnatural to us, what they're ultimately trying to do is produce a psychosis where people give up and they don't perceive that there's any opportunity for betterment, and they don't feel that they have any individual or group power in order to implement change. And they instead become hapless and hopeless and simply give up and surrender their fate and look for momentary gratification in either the schadenfreude of putting down some individual, like the ancients used to beat a scapegoat and chase him out of the city to put all the sins of society on that individual. You see a lot of that going on Twitter and in other areas where people justify their own personal sense of self-worth by harming others. And you see this group attack happening on people, and you see people becoming polarized and obtaining their sense of self-worth in how they can harm and belittle other people. And we're losing all of our ancestral morality and all of the class that human beings used to have. And in its place, what's being substituted is very low class, very base, very vulgar, very common, very unsophisticated, very childish, immature, insane on many levels, degenerate on many levels. Our society is starting to break down. We've been able to maintain a certain amount of economic activity because that can be generate economic activity in terms of this desire, these lusts for having things. But the quality of the things that we have is going to start diminishing. The government is going to start insisting that we reduce our standard of living, and they're setting us up to even be deprived of our food sources. They're trying to tell us that it's evil for human beings to generate food because it generates greenhouse gases and methane that trap heat in the atmosphere and won't allow it to escape into outer space. And therefore, we have to starve ourselves and reduce our populations. But they're not starving themselves, and they're not refraining from having children. Well, the class stratification in society, it's even more than a class stratification of money. It's much more a class stratification of power and of access to information. And they are creating us as a serf class that they're setting about to exterminate.
So Max, vision has it. How bad do you think it's going to get before it gets better? Like how? What do you
It depends on us, because there's nobody coming on a white horse to save us.
No,
If
that's
we
right. There's no
continue
Jesus,
to
there's
do
no
nothing,
UFO. Yeah, no aliens.
no aliens, no gods, no
No Jesus.
saviors, no politicians who love us and are looking out for us
No.
because they're good at throwing one-liners and insulting their political opponents. None of that is going to get us where we need to be. We have to understand what is happening and who is ultimately behind it. And we have to defend ourselves. We are under threat. We are being attacked. We are being killed off. And it is incumbent upon us to defend ourselves from those aggressors. And the only way we can do it is to become politically active and to organize and to try to build communities and to advance our knowledge of how it is that they subvert that process. I've been studying it for 25, 30 years in the alternative media and everything else, how very sophisticated and good they are at creating infights and accusing one another of things. And now they have the sophistication with their algorithms in social media to boost people and to shadow ban people. It's tough. And there has to be access to people in order for this to work. So we have to be smarter about how we're going to gain that access to one another and how we're going to set up means of communicating where it cannot be shut down and diverted into things which dissolve everything that gets built, while at the same time our enemies are fortifying everything that they're doing.
Yeah.
The Hebrew year 6000 will be in 2240, but there are two different systems. There's the Anno Mundi calendar, which reflects the Hebrew calendar, which says that 6,000 years from the creation of Adam will be in Anno Domini 2240. But then there's also the Anno Lucas calendar, which matches our calendar but adds 4,000 years to it. So the year 6000 was the year 2000 on our calendar. And you can see that chiseled into Freemasonic temples as you pass by their doorways. They have the two dates. They have the Anno Domini and they have the Anno Lucas. And it's always the Anno Domini plus 4,000, which is why I believe the movie, Kubrick's movie, was called Space Odyssey 2001, because that represented the year 6001 on the Freemasonic calendar, which is also utilized by the Kabbalists. And both Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke were very steeped in Freemasonic and Kabbalistic beliefs, and their movie was completely based on those beliefs, and that's why the title was 2001, which is code that actually represents 6001, the first year of the seventh millennium, the first year of the Sabbath millennium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is very,
But they
very
want to
interesting.
do it as soon as possible. Those dates really mean nothing to them.
Yeah, I
What
think
they
we're overdue, actually. They were probably planning on doing this. Well, 2011, like we had the whole 9/11 thing. That was probably, yeah, right at that 6,000 mark.
2001, 9/11 was
Yeah,
2001.
that is,
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you completely. And they've been doing this for thousands of years. They've been saying that
mhm,
it hasn't happened because they have failed to honor the Torah, or they as a people have not united. They brought on God's wrath in a number of ways. They always move the goalposts when their plans don't occur.
mhm.
But we're at the point that they anticipated we should be at this time, at this year 6000. And 240 years, though in our human lives it seems like a lot in terms of the fate of humanity, it's the blink of an eye. And they believe that the sooner it happens, the better, because if it doesn't happen by 2240, then the gods will wreak catastrophe on them as well as us. So they feel obligated and motivated to make it happen now. And the sooner it happens, according to their mythologies, the less painful it will be for them.
So this is
They
why
call it
everything
the birth
is
pangs
kinda,
of the Messiah.
yeah, this is why it's all coming. Like everybody can see it now. I mean, it's in the news. I mean, yeah, it's wow. Well,
And as a
wow.
woman gives birth, her contractions become more violent, more painful, and more
Mhm.
frequent
That's
until the
right.
muscles become stretched and the baby can exit the womb. And
Mhm.
that's the way they perceive the birth pangs that they're going to impose on us, like the 10 plagues that they believe their ancestors imposed on Egypt, is that these calamities and catastrophes, the amplitude will increase and the cyclic rate will increase. We'll get hit by more and more of them faster and faster. And each one will be more and more severe, like waves that resonate, and their amplitude increases as they cross, and the rate at which they oscillate increases.
Yeah. I can't believe it's been 2 hours. I guess we gotta wrap this up here, but if you guys are finding this interesting and you wanna know more, I highly suggest to get his book, okay? And go and check out his YouTube. He's got so many videos, that and it every video kinda ties in with basically what we're just talking about here, the agenda, what's going on, why they're doing it, and, the urgency really that we need to wake up. So this is very important that you guys not only watch the videos, but make sure you subscribe, hit the like, and share it out so that other people can find this stuff, right? It's very, very important. It's the only way that we're going to wake people up, honestly. I don't know what else we can do. Do you have any suggestions as to what people can do? Maybe as we leave this on a positive note, hopefully.
That's always the tough one is what is the solution? Where is the
Mm,
way out?
right.
And I suggest that we start setting up networks of people where we can communicate with one another and start to share this knowledge and then become a political force, at least on some level. That's the only way I can see making this happen. What would help tremendously is if we can get some charismatic, inspiring people to assume leadership roles to collect large numbers of people in a persuasive way to start to organize. And if anyone knows of any good, charismatic, sincere, honest people, that would help out tremendously.
Yeah, there you go. So throwing it out there, put my Gilded in here because I think that's a good place to go where we can chat about this kind of stuff where it's not as censored there, as far as I know. I got kicked off Discord, so we're on Gilded now. I
You
put that
got
in
kicked
there.
off of Discord?
I think somebody reported me, but apparently I can't see, I mean, yeah, I posted some stuff in there, but but I've already been shadow banned from having a truth seeker group on Facebook years ago. So, they're,
We got to
yeah, I'm
think of
actually,
ways to get around this censorship.
I know. Well, I don't know how to do, like, where we, I'm going to see if I can find your links.
The first step is to set the goal. Maybe we should say, how do we get 100 people together or something like that? Set a goal.
Yeah.
And once we achieve that, move from there or something.
This is Christopher's YouTube channel. If you guys want to go in there, make sure you go in there. Yeah, so join up on Gilded, and then we can chat there. It's kind of like, yeah, a little bit more
Would you
censored.
please email me the information for that?
The Gilded?
Yes, I'm not
Yeah,
familiar with Gilded.
Oh, okay. Are you familiar with Discord?
Yes,
Okay, it's
peripherally.
just
I've
like
never set up a
Discord.
Discord channel.
Okay, it's just like Discord, except it's
okay.
called Gilded. Yeah, this same kind of concept. So we can share
So
videos,
you set up
different rooms.
memberships and people can come on and then they can have different levels of information that they can access in different, through
They
different
do
portals.
offer that. I didn't set mine up that way. I don't have a membership on there, but so it's just anybody can come in. But I do have different rooms, different subjects. So whatever you're interested in, you can post, your stuff in there. I even have a place where you can post up your own stuff, and yeah, so we can like continue discussing, these videos there, kind of thing. And
That's
I'm pretty
wonderful.
sure,
And
yeah.
thank you so much for having me on again to let me express all
Yeah.
this.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I think the next one, I think I know what I want. I want to hear more about the black cube thing. We can do
Oh,
one on
okay.
that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think yeah. And if
That
you guys
ties into
have
a
any,
lot about what's going on with UFOs and other things.
yes, right. Because that's the next thing that's coming up is the whole fake alien invasion thing, right? Which,
Yep.
is another fear factor, right? It's another roller coaster of fear. What do they call it? Polyfear, a poly crisis. We're in a poly crisis situation right now. It's just one after another, and that's just keeping our frequency down, our immune system down, and we can't make rational decisions, like you said, when we're in fear because of the numbers that are going to come up on the screen. That's, who knows where those things come from, right? So don't fall for it, people, and yeah, stay tuned for the next one. We're going to go over the whole cube thing because it does tie in with the alien thing, and it ties in, actually all of them I find kind of ties into humanity is at risk, basically, and that we need to bring awareness to that, and that's basically what we're
And
doing
we're
here.
under attack, deliberate
Yeah, we are.
attack.
We are under attack for sure on all kinds of levels, right? All the different agendas, and people are falling for it left, right, and center. I see it all around me, and it's scary. It really is scary that people are walking around believing this stuff, so. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you for liking and sharing and subscribing. Go and check out our links. They're all down in the description here. And hopefully I'll see you guys all on Gilded, and I'll definitely email you that. And yeah, we'll be back in a month with Christopher again and touch on the cube thing. So if you guys have any questions, put them down in the comments, or you can email us, or whatever you want to do. Get a hold of us. All our links are down below. So thank you, D. Barry, and nice to see you. There was some new faces in here today, so that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to say before we close her up there?
Just thank you, everyone, for watching. I appreciate it very much. And I hope that I was able to convey some new insights.
Yes. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for watching, and let us know what you thought. Bye, everybody.